Jessie Douglas Kerruish was a British writer. She was born in 1884 in Seaton Caerhun, County Durham, Ireland. Her father was a sea captain hailing from the Isle of Man and died in 1900. She lived in Sussex and died in 1949 in Hove. Between 1909 and 1913 she published 3 booklets of 60 pages for W.T. Stead's Books for the Bairns series. The Gambler Prince and How He Was Saved by His Wife, The Raksha Raja or the King of the Ogres, and Tales and Legends of the Isle of Man. Her first novel was the 1917 Ms. Harun al-Rashid, made into a silent film, A Romance of Old Baghdad in 1922. We will review her 1922 The Undying Monster, the only work for which she is remembered today. Now before we begin, as this novel is everywhere touted as a superb example of werewolf fiction, it becomes rather obvious what the big shocking reveal is that takes 2/3 of the book to happen. A reveal most editions love to spoil on the cover, especially the very doofy looking one I had to include. The novel begins in Danow, a Sussex village held by the Hammonds for some 1,000 years. Swanhild Hammond is woken up by a call that the Undying Monster is loose in the swan beneath the monstrous man, a hill figure like the Long Man of Wilmington. Only the Undying Monster is real and has been the bane of the family for generations, showing up suddenly and having all Hammonds who face it commit suicide right after. This time, Swanhild's brother Oliver has been the victim while meeting in the wood with Kate Stringer. Swanhild drives over and finds Oliver's dog horribly mangled, Oliver unconscious and Kate almost dead and missing huge chunks of herself. Oliver doesn't remember what happened, but Swanhild is worried he will remember and kill himself like their grandfather 30 years before. She seeks the help of her fiancé Godard, who had been with Oliver in the trenches of the First World War. The two hunt up famed, hypersensitive Luna Bartendale, who happens to be in the area. She comes up and looks over the site of the mauling, before going over the family records of all the Hammonds killed by the monster or who killed themselves after seeing it, the 2 exceptions being a crusader and a Christian anchorite. Going to the local church, they examine the monuments to the dead Hammonds killed by the monster, and Luna focuses her attention on Magnus the Warlock, who fought for Henry VII at Bosworth and whose son was killed and partially eaten by the monster, and whose memorial includes a note buying himself absolution from the church to release his soul from purgatory 26,000 years early. She also wants to look at the artistic brass representations of the monster, made after the fact by people who weren't witnesses, as if that would prove anything. Uncovering a hidden room, they find the Warlock's promised clue he left behind, a rune-inscribed sword and a hand of glory made from the severed hand of a gibbeted murderer. They then dig up a local tumulus and find the Warlock had loosened the monster bound there by the anchorite, in the hopes of becoming emperor of the world. Then they finally tell Oliver it was him who bit chunks out of Kate, after they find him trying to rip out Goddard's throat. As noted, the whole book is being very mysterious about the whole werewolf thing, but it's really obvious. The explanation for why some Hammonds become werewolves is an ancestor cursed Odin and said he'd rather be a wolf on the day of Ragnarok. But the explanation for the requirements necessary for the transformation is a bit overcomplicated. You need A male Hammond who is the owner of Danow, B pine trees, C cold weather, D a starry night, and E being in the company of exactly one other person and no more, because a second person showing up just undoes that. The finale has 2 chapters where Luna makes Oliver hypnotize and think he's going through Ragnarok, the description she gives being all epic and such, but he is just sat there holding imaginary brittles and putting on invisible armor, and it's rather silly and a bit pathetic. The good bits of the novel are a bit weighed down by all the hypnotic sessions and 4th and 5th dimensional jargon spewed by Luna, and all the explanations for how she came up with everything, which grind the story to a halt at times.